A relationship historically marred by suspicion, mistrust, and at times frustration and violence. So when, after just 15 months in office, FBI Director James Comey chose to confront the shortcomings of both police and communities of color, challenging them to modify their behavior and find new ways to seek common ground, his comments were largely praised for their candor. The question is, will it make a difference? Later, we'll talk with an attorney and a senior vice president with the National Urban League, a public relations executive married to a police officer, and a leading journalist and commentator. But first, some background on this from CCTV's Jim Spellman.
It was a startling speech from FBI Director James Comey, taking on race relations between police and the communities they serve, an issue many in law enforcement may prefer to avoid.
We can roll up our car windows, turn up the radio, and drive around these problems. Or we can choose instead to have an open and honest discussion about what our relationship is today.
The speech came after high-profile, racially charged incidents between police and African Americans. Last summer in Staten Island, New York, Eric Garner was killed while being arrested by a white police officer. And black teenager Michael Brown was shot and killed by a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri.
Hands up! Don't shoot! Hands up! Don't shoot!
The incident sparked protests nationwide. Neither police officer was charged with a crime. Later came the execution-style murders of NYPD officers Wenjin Liu and Rafael Ramos by an African-American man who claimed the killings were retribution for the Brown and Garner cases.
Unfortunately, in places like Ferguson and New York City and in some communities across this nation, there is a disconnect between police agencies and the citizens they serve, predominantly in communities of color.
A disconnect that both white and black Americans doubt will change soon. A December poll by the Pew Research Center shows just 21% see relations between police and minorities getting better over the next year. More than a third of whites and half of blacks think relations will actually get worse. Comey says admitting bias is the first step.
Many people in our white majority culture have unconscious racial biases and react differently to a white face than a black face. In fact, we all, white and black, carry various biases around with us.
Like many local police forces in the U.S., the FBI has struggled with racial issues.
Each of the special agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation must be ready and capable to meet any challenge.
In the 1960s, under the leadership of Director J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI spied on Dr. Martin Luther King, assembling a dossier of negative information on the famed civil rights leader.
And I've seen the promised land.
Now the FBI uses that legacy to give new agents a better perspective on race.
I require all new agents and analysts to study the FBI's interaction with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to visit his memorial in Washington as part of their training.
Comey argues most police officers are good people doing hard work, and that issues of poverty, education, and a lack of economic opportunity mean predominantly minority communities may create more challenges for police. The FBI has launched an effort to collect better data on policing and race, but beyond that, there's still a long way to go to improve relations between police and the communities they serve. President Obama has formed a so-called task force on 21st century policing to find better ways to create partnerships between police and minority communities. They're due to report their findings to the president by March 2nd. Anand?
Thanks, Jim. That's CCTV's Jim Spellman reporting them.